Hi everyone, welcome to Unknown Reviews. I'm Dylan. This is a channel where I talk music, movies, MBTI, sports, basketball, anything I want to talk about pretty much. I've only done music up until this point just because I kind of want to get consistent with one thing, but trust me, I'm going to branch out to those other subjects. But today is a review of Ka's Languish Arts. That's the name of the album. It came out last month, and it was actually suggested to me by someone who watched I think it was my Billy Woods review. I think I'm shouting out the right name, Quantum Passport. Thank you so much for recommending this album to me. I am in love with this album. But before I get into the album, I do want to say, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching the Billy Woods review, watching the Boldy James review, interacting with the videos that I put out so much. I was not expecting so much engagement, and it's like super exciting because I really just want to contribute to the conversation and talk more about the stuff that I love. Anything else that you guys want to see me cover, different things like that, please let me know in the comments. I just want to find new music and talk about it and share it to other people so they can talk about it, and I just want to make a nice little community here. So let me just get into this review. So Ka is a underground rapper. He's like an underground rapper. I mean, like if you go to his Spotify listeners, it's like 60,000. I've heard of him for a while, and I knew that he was really good. I knew that he was really respected, but I just never got around to listening to one of his projects until it was recommended to me. I will just come out and say it, like this was my first exposure to Ka whatsoever, the new Languish Arts album, and it is probably my album of the year, even though it's only been like 2 or 3 days since I've listened to it. It's all I've been listening to. So just jumping right into it, I don't even know where to start. This is just like one of those situations where there's like a really good movie and someone recommends it to you, but they don't want to tell you anything about the plot because they're like, you just have to go into it blind. And I feel like that's the best way to experience Ka, because like if I explain him to you like I'm going to now, he's not going to sound that much different than other rappers that are in similar spaces. You know, he's poetic, he's got the drumless kind of production going on. It's very moody, it's very spacey, and it pretty much is just like a soundscape for him to just drop bar after bar of just self-reflective, passionate, just poetry. And so when I paint that picture, I think of a navy blue, I think of a Mac Miller, I think of, you know, there's a couple other ones out there that are kind of like escaping me right now. And you can obviously even throw Earl Sweatshirt and Billy Woods in there and, you know, all the other ones, right? But there is something just different about Ka. First of all, he is one of the best rapping voices I've ever heard. He commands your attention. And it's not in a aggressive way. He has actually like a very soft tone to his voice, but there's still this like authority to it. And it immediately hooks you in. He's this really amazing way of just making you pay attention to what he's saying. You can't get lost. It just feels like he's like sitting you down and this is what I need you to hear. The first track on the album, which I don't know, I have a couple of different ones that are kind of like my favorites. But Full Cobra is definitely one of them. So it starts out, like it said, there's a lot of guitar strings being played on here. And I say guitar strings because it's not like strumming guitars. It's just like a few melodies, a few notes here and there. And they paint this really interesting backdrop and this really kind of moody, forlorn backdrop. But it's guitars, there's no drums. And there's this really like endearing sample. I love it. It's these kids like saying good morning. But that kind of kicks off the album. You've got these moody guitars coming in and these hits, very light hits in the back of static. Then throughout this track, you get this amazing picture of who he is as not only a rapper and an artist, but as a person. It's like the first line that opens up the album. He says, I speak some triumphs, some mistakes. Just plain and simple, who he is and what he does. One of the other standouts in verse 1 that really, I think, kind of gives you a window into where he's coming from. He says, they'd rain praises with same phrases and younger face. I do this quaint rap, true it ain't trap. I brung escapes. I value that's less valued, whatever come in haste. Now, okay, like, if you just read that, doesn't even sound like, do you call that a bar? Like, I don't even know, it just sounds like poetry. And it, like, not only that, it sounds like older poetry, not even modern poetry. This is my interpretation of it. He's like, some of the things that I'm talking about, if I was younger, and if I was more like, you know, with the times or whatever, it would catch on a lot more. But because I'm from a different generation, because I'm a bit older, you know, it's quaint rap, it's not trap. So he's very aware, and he has these a couple more lines like this across the album, but he's very aware that a lot of people are gonna hear this album and it's not gonna make that much of an impression on them. They might even find it boring. And even more, the even bigger takeaway that I get from that is that he's like, a lot of people aren't going to hear this album and they aren't going to care. As an artist myself, I read that and I relate so much as someone who is more drawn to underground aesthetics and underground styles. And I know, like, when I release the music that I'm making, when I release the writing that I'm making, it's not going to be like the most commercially viable. It's not going to be the most widely accepted. Some people are going to look at it and not get it, or think that it's pretentious or dumb or, you know, pointless or whatever, or not, just not engaging. And I think one of the biggest things as an artist is if you're gonna go down that lane, you have to accept that early on, and understand that there are going to be a lot of people that are just not going to get what in the world it is you're on about, and you have to kind of like wrestle with that early on. But sometimes it never leaves you, and it's just a fact. And that's kind of what Kai is talking about. And all throughout this album, he talks about fact. He's obsessed with fact and what is, and what's real and what's true. There's even a song on the album saying, if it's not true, then it's not for me. And it's an entire song about truth and reality and fact. He has another verse somewhere on the album. I loved this verse. He says, the greatest gift that you can give a child is fact. That seems to be a really big part of his general worldview. Just seeing a line like that, just plainly stated, like, you know, this is quaint rap, and it doesn't matter how much heart I put into it. Some people are just going to look over it. But there's a couple more really great introductory lines on this album that, again, really give Ka a sense of character. He really expresses what, you know, the things that are on his mind, the things that he wants to talk about really well. He doesn't let the instrumental get in the way of it. He doesn't let trying to get to some concept get in the way of it. He's just like, this is what I want to say, and this is how I want to express myself. So he opens up verse 2. He says, probably can't tell this body's a shell, not my true form. No need to be rude. If it don't move you, just move on. But the delivery of that, like, I don't know, I feel weird even like reciting it, because it doesn't do it any justice. But the way that he kind of casually says, like, the rest of the beat drops out and he's just like, just move on. If it doesn't affect you, if what I'm doing here doesn't make an impact on you, you don't need to hate it. You don't need to drop hate comments and say, oh, this is mid, oh, this is whatever. You don't need to get so worked up about it. Just go somewhere else. Like, I'm interacting with my art the way I want to interact with it. Find whatever works for you. And I think that's such a mature way of looking with art, because you could look at that line and you could think that he's saying, like, oh, I don't want criticism, I don't want negativity, whatever. And that's not what he's saying. I really don't think that's what he's saying, especially in the context of the rest of the album. I think what he's saying, and the perspective that he's presenting here, which is so meaningful to me as an artist, and if you're an aspiring artist as well, I really think that you should just take a look at kind of where Kai's coming from. But he's just like, find whatever it is that works for you. Like, why are you spending time investing like negativity and hatred into something that you hate, and instead of finding something that you like and you personally resonate with? And, you know, like, I'm comfortable enough in myself to not trash other people's art, trash other people's things, and, you know, I respect it. It's that whole like art and subjectivity conversation, but it's one that like really needs to be had, especially in underground spaces, because there's a lot of times where people get favorited over other underground rappers, and when really the quality gap is really not that far, and a lot of times it's kind of non-existent, because there comes a certain point, especially in this genre, but in music in general, but there comes a certain point where it's not even about talent anymore necessarily. It's just whatever these artists are deciding to do or say. Like, for example, I fully believe someone like an Earl Sweatshirt or someone like a Billy Woods could make a album like Ka. It doesn't make it better or worse. I just think it would serve the same purpose, but that's not what they're trying to express as artists. They want to go into other things. Really resonate with this track because it brings a really refreshing and confident perspective as a rapper and as an artist. And it's not cocky at all. If you notice, he's not, like, especially if you read the rest of the lyrics, and pretty much across the entire album, he's never bragging, he's never flexing, he's never saying anything like that, but there is this very quiet confidence about him that is just, it's really cool to see. And then he has another line, or a set of lines that kind of circles around the same topic, but again, I find it so refreshing. He says, just telling my story, glad it's received as music. It's a lot of wounds in these tombs, please excuse it. Ain't hard to show the scars if I need to prove it. Which, again, is just really refreshing to hear. There's another line somewhere in the album where he says, I'm just writing these poems so that there's something when I'm all bones. That I'm paraphrasing, but it's, you know, it's about the art, and it's not only about the art, it's about mortality, and it's about leaving a lasting impact on a community and all these different things. It's not just, hey, I'm gonna make a song that people like and can kind of, you know, listen to as they ride the train or whatever. It's deeper than that for Ka. And, you know, it's just, there's a gravity to this entire album, and there's a gravity to his perspective that it's honestly really refreshing for people who take art really, really seriously. I feel like that feels gatekeepy to say, but like, seriously, I think that this is an album for serious music listeners. And I feel like Ka is a artist for serious music listeners. And yeah, I think Full Cobra is just an incredible song. I'm gonna get into other tracks, but I mean, I could spend so much time on every single track. I would rather just give you one or two so that you can kind of get a sense of what this album is, and then I want you to experience the rest for yourself. But the last thing I'll say about Full Cobra is it also has a really great, really anthemic chorus where he just says, got the hood on my back, full cobra. And that there's something so like empowering about that statement. It gets to me every single time. So Full Cobra ends with this vocal snippet of this guy talking about the relationship between his father and his mother, and his relationship with each of his parents, and how that informed some of how he viewed masculinity and emotion and all of these different things. And just all I'll say is pay attention to the vocal snippets that come at the end or the beginning of a lot of these tracks, because they're very important to the overall texture of the album. That's kind of how I'll put that. But right from this kind of like guitar string laden beat, it transfers immediately, it beat switches immediately into Ascension. I've never heard someone rap over this before. It's another drumless instrumental, but it's just these violin accents, these accented violins hitting over and over and over again, and they never resolve. And Ka just starts rapping over it. Like, at first I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, this is just like an intro, and then the beat's gonna kind of like settle down a little bit. There's gonna be some drums coming in, and then in like 30 seconds, 40 seconds go by, and I'm like, oh, this is it. He's just rapping over accented violin hits. I don't know what kind of reverb they put on or whatever, but it sounds so cavernous and intense, but also so rich. Like, it's just produced immaculately, and Ka does all the production as well. And this whole album sounds like the picture that is on the album cover, and it not in the dilapidated way that's on the album cover, but just that like gray feeling. So it's like, this is definitely not a happy album, and I think at a certain point I will start playing other songs back into my rotation, because I don't know that I want to stay in the headspace of this album for so long, because it is very dreary. But the instrumentals really, really paint that picture really well, and it does feel really gray. But it's still beautiful and artistic at the same time. Like, this beat on Ascension, I call it a beat, it's not really a beat, but it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. And Ka is just doing his thing over it. I'm gonna throw up a couple of different standout lyrics, because again, I could talk for probably about 20 minutes on each song, but just know that Ascension is also, I think, one of the best tracks on this album, and I've never heard someone rap over something like that before. So I loved the bold production choice on Ascension. The one lyric I'll point out, after looking over the lyrics, I want to point this one out, because again, it gives you a better sense of where Ka's coming from. He says, as more I understand my posture, till I'm posthumous, till little me's thinking critically, I got no accomplishments. And across the entire album, there's this theme of Ka passing on his insights to his children, or I don't know if he has kids or wants kids, but to the youth and to future generations. And here he's basically saying, till little me, till little Ka, his kid or whatever, I don't know if that's figurative or, you know, literal or whatever the word is. But he's basically like, until my kids are thinking critically and seeing the world for what it is, seeing the facts, having the facts, like that other line that he brought up. He's like, I have no accomplishments. I didn't do anything. None of this matters to me until the youth gets this knowledge that I'm imparting on them. And the first, one of the first lines off of verse 2, he says, I talk to you like an old uncle. That's my nuance. And it's self-aware, and you know, you can laugh at it. And I think he's laughing at it too. He's like, yeah, I know I'm the old uncle boomer guy, but also he's saying, you know, like, it's that old uncle stereotype of the really old wise guy. And I think Ka's 50 or 51 or something. I think he recognizes that that's kind of his place. And I think he brings it upon himself to impart this wisdom onto the younger generation as he sees it. And it's a really interesting characterization. I got Kendrick vibes off of this album, which is really interesting because Kendrick is really flashy, he's really out there. Whereas Ka's the complete opposite. But they both have this very deep-rooted sense of like, I am the one that has to pull my city, my people out of the gutter. After listening to this album, I read an interview, and long story short, he was asked a question about the state of New York or Brooklyn. I think that's the neighborhood that whatever neighborhood he was from, he was asked about the state of it, and how it's in decline or whatever. And he basically was like, you know, I don't expect anyone to do anything about it. I'm gonna have to do it myself. And it gives very much like Batman vibes, very much like savior vibes, not in a toxic way at all. I think in a very commendable way. But yeah, I got Kendrick vibes, even from the snippets. Like, again, the one talking about like masculinity and like father figures and all these different things. I got Mr. Morale vibes from this album, which is really interesting. So Kendrick fans, you might like Ka. In fact, you probably will like Ka, because to me they are on equal playing fields in terms of depth and what they're going for. But anyways, again, I said I can't spend 10 minutes on every single song, so I gotta move on. What I'll say about other songs in the track list: No Reservations, great song, loved the chorus. I'm going to throw up a couple of standout lyrics on there. If I see something I really need to mention in post, I will mention it in post. But long story short, No Reservations, a really good track, more like guitar strings and like a really good moody kind of thing. And then it goes right into Forgive Me, which is another track kind of filled with guitars and things like that. The lyrics on this one and the delivery, it's just, I don't know, there's something about this one that just, it hits really, really different. And it's all about forgiveness, and it's all about Ka bearing the weight of things that he's had to do in the past that he's not proud of. Like, No Reservations and Forgive Me kind of go together. The chorus on No Reservations, he says, we were sitting for dinner with no reservations. So back in the day, back in, you know, Brooklyn, New York, when he was growing up, he had to kill, rob, do whatever he had to do with no reservations. Of course, that's a nice double entendre. We were sitting for dinner, no reservations. But the next track kind of is like the back end of that, and he's like, I'm asking the people that I hurt for forgiveness. The chorus is, he says, if I ever put a 4 on you and said gimme, forgive me. And there's something so powerful and so rich and raw and emotional about his voice, even for someone who is so fact-based and so, you know, clear-headed and sober-minded about how he sees the world, and someone who seems very practical and logical. You can hear in every single song, in the way that he raps, he pours his heart and soul into these songs, and he pours his heart and soul into his community. And so I'm sure it just, you can hear it, it eats him up inside, that at a certain point he had to rob people, do what he had to do. And so in this song, he's asking for forgiveness. There's this one line in particular, I mean, again, all of the lines are incredible. I won't spoil them. But there's one line where he says, sorry for where I pushed you, you were in the way, I'm just trying to formulate before I'm shaped back into clay. Another kind of mortality bar. That is really interesting to me. I was trying to formulate before I shaped back into clay. Formulate what? I think that it's really interesting that he didn't really kind of specify what he was trying to formulate. I think he was trying to say, like, you know, I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to be and exist. I don't even know what it is that I'm scraping for or fighting for other than survival. Or maybe it is just survival. I just think it's a really interesting line. I think you can take it a lot of different ways. This track really hits home. And yeah, I just think it's one of the best tracks on the album. Maybe one of the best tracks of the year, but I mean, like, there's a couple of really heavy hitters on this album. I'm just gonna cover like one or two more songs on this because I really don't want to spoil a lot of it. I really think this is an album that you should just go into as blind as possible, like I did. Just go off of Ka's reputation alone, or go off of the reputation of other rappers that are similar that you would like. Like, if you like Billy Woods, you're gonna like Ka most likely. If you like an Earl Sweatshirt or like one of these more confessional type rappers like a Navy Blue, you're gonna like Ka. Just really, really rich stuff, and I can't wait to get into the rest of his albums. Just like an instant classic for me. This dude is an instant great. So going from Forgive Me, you go into If Not True, which is the song all about truth and fact and all those things like that. And there's a really great looping piano melody that kind of switches in octaves every once in a while to keep things interesting, and it kind of gets into this pocket, and then the drums kick in, and it's this really kind of like never resolving beat. But it's really hypnotizing. You lock in immediately, and then Ka's actually singing on this on the chorus, and like there's a lot of reverb on his voice. It sounds very cavernous, and the chorus is, if it's not true, it's not for me. And then there's a couple of lines after that, but I loved this chorus. And then as it builds up through the rest of the song, when the chorus comes back, then he's got background vocalists, and there's this really interesting chord progression where every time you think that it might resolve to something a bit more like resolute or wholesome, it gets darker and it gets more tense and more pent up. And I really respected that choice. I loved everything about If Not True. And then from that point on, and this is the last track I'll mention, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the album, then I'll wrap up. But Unindulged, I think, is one of the best beats on the album. It's an actual beat, and the guest verse from Chuck Strangers, another rapper who I've never heard of, he comes in. I love the way he rides on this beat. I mean, he does a really great job. He's got some really great lines on there. And then when Ka comes in, he does his thing. It's probably, I would say, the most accessible track. I think it's just really like classic hip hop. Like, it's really good. There's more strings. It's another kind of like guitars in the back kind of beat. The drums are very light, but there's almost kind of like a snapping quality to them. You'll see what I mean when you listen to it. But I mean, just vibes with great lyrics and just an overall great mood. I mean, like, album 6 for 6 at this point. I'm gonna leave the last 4 tracks a mystery. Just know that they're incredible. I love them. Touche is a really, like, it's the most challenging one for me. But it's just like Ascension. It's a really bold instrumental choice. It's all woodwinds, like droning woodwinds. That's all I'm gonna say. But this album specifically is so obviously one artist's vision, unencumbered by anyone else getting involved. He does the production, he does the mixing, he does the writing, he does all of it. It's hard for me to call it a vision. I think it's just his state of being. As a person. And I think that he's just really translated that well into just really affecting music. And it's just inspiring as an artist, as a creative person, to see that. So it's like, this album is really special for me. I don't think I can afford the vinyl. If I remember reading correctly, I think it's like $100. I'm on a student budget, but I would like to get it at some point someday. Just to support him. I feel like he is one of these artists that we absolutely need to start putting respect on, talking about more, not for the sake of some ranking list or anything like that. This is just incredible art, you know? But I also think it's incredibly unique, which is why I really think that he needs that platform to really kind of show people what he could do. After listening to this album fully for the first time, I was like, he is hands down one of the greatest rappers I have ever heard in my life. So, I mean, yeah, that is my review of Languish Arts by Ka. 10 out of 10. I mean, like, I don't know what else to say about it. It's one of those rare cases where I come into an album and I'm just like, it's incredible. Like, I had this experience when I listened to Haram, and I just sat down and listened to it constantly, where I'm just like, this is a perfect album. When I say perfect album, I just mean like really dynamic and unique concepts and sounds and ideas, really clear bodies of work that very clearly accomplish the goal that they set out, the message they were trying to send, the soundscape that they were trying to create. To me, that is a perfect album. If the artist did exactly what they intended to do with skill and uniqueness and obvious quality compared to other people that are doing similar things, to me, that's a perfect album. And Language Arts 100% achieves that for me. I still plan on reviewing the Freddie Gibbs album. It's just this album stopped me in my tracks, and I was just like, I have to talk about it, otherwise it's going to drive me insane. But I still plan on reviewing the Freddie Gibbs album. When the Tana Talk 4 album drops, I will be reviewing that. I will be reviewing the Arctic Monkey album when it drops. Both those drop in like 4 or 5-ish days. I would like to review the Mavi album. I don't know if I'll get around to it, but also if there is anything in particular that you guys would like me to review, I would love to review it, obviously, because I listened to this album based off of a recommendation, and it was absolutely incredible. I loved being exposed to new music, so please drop recommendations so I can listen to them. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Unknown Reviews. Follow me on TikTok at Unknown Reviews for more music content and conversation and all that good stuff. And yeah, until next time, I will see you later. Bye.